A lone woman's voice echoes through the windswept San Pedro Valley, where Meera Callahan, orphaned at 7, carved a life from dust and resilience. Haunted by faint memories of fire-lit nights and shadowy warriors, she guards her father's land and its precious spring with a rifle and unyielding will. In 1885, 7 Apache riders emerge from the desert, not for war, but to fulfill a sacred vow that binds their fate to hers. Will Meera's solitude shatter under the weight of an ancient promise, or will she forge a new destiny? Subscribe now, share where you're listening from, and uncover how courage and honor collide in this unforgettable tale. What secrets lie in her past? The San Pedro Valley stretched out like a cracked leather hide, its red dust swirling under a merciless Arizona sun in the summer of 1885. Meera Callahan, 23 years old, stood on the warped porch of her father's cabin, her shadow sharp against the weathered pine. Her eyes, the color of a faded desert sky, scanned the horizon where heat shimmered off the rocks. She was no stranger to solitude. It clung to her like the grit on her calloused hands, a second skin forged by 16 years of surviving alone. The valley was her world, a 50-acre fortress of scrub and stone, anchored by a hidden spring that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Meera's father, Elias Callahan, had been a hunter, a man of sinew and silence, whose courage was whispered in the bones of this land. In 1869, he'd sheltered a desperate Apache family, wife and children of a chief, hiding them from Mexican bounty hunters who hunted scalps for coin. He'd bound their wounds, shared his meager stores, and earned a vow. Our blood and our children's blood will be joined, so the debt of life is never forgotten. But that same year, those hunters returned. They left no vow, only blood, slaughtering Elias and his wife under a moonless sky. Meera, a trembling 7-year-old, hid in the root cellar, clutching her mother's shawl, her world reduced to the muffled screams and the glow of a distant fire. She emerged to a silent cabin, her parents gone, and faint memories of strange warriors fading like smoke. Now, Meera moved with the precision of a hawk, every action honed by necessity. Her days were a rhythm of survival, the thud of her hoe in the stubborn garden, the creak of the corral gate as she checked her 2 mules, the soft cluck of chickens scratching in the dirt. The spring, a rare gift in this arid waste, coaxed life from the soil, a patch of beans, squash, and defiance. Her cabin, built by her father's hands, stood squat and solid, its single window glaring east like an unblinking eye. At night, she barred the ironwood door, her Winchester rifle propped beside it, a silent sentinel against the world that had taken everything. The valley wasn't just her home, it was her armor. Meera had learned to read its signs, the shift of a coyote's shadow, the sudden hush of sparrows signaling trouble. Her father's lessons were carved into her. Track game, shoot straight, trust no one. She'd made rare trips to Mesquite Hollow, the nearest town, where folks called her the Callahan girl, a half-wild hermit who'd sooner spit than smile. Her skin, tanned to the hue of saddle leather, bore the scars of sun and toil. Her hair, once chestnut, was now streaked with the pale gold of relentless light, tied back in a braid as practical as her life. This morning, the air was heavy, the kind of heat that pressed down like a blacksmith's hammer. Meera knelt by the spring, filling a bucket, the water cold against her fingers. She paused, sensing a change, a stillness too deep, as if the valley held its breath. The sparrows had gone quiet. Her hand drifted to the Colt holstered at her hip, its grip worn smooth by years of instinct. She stood, eyes narrowing at the ridge where the trail snaked down. Nothing moved, but the hairs on her neck prickled. Something was coming. She wasn't a woman given to fear. Fear was a luxury for those with someone to lean on. Yet, as she stacked firewood against the cabin wall, her gaze kept flicking to the horizon. The stories from Mesquite Hollow echoed in her mind. Apache raiders, ghosts of the desert, striking and vanishing. But Meera didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in the weight of her rifle, the strength in her arms, and the spring that made her land a prize worth killing for. If trouble came, she'd meet it head-on, as she always had. And trouble was coming, not with the clatter of hooves or the glint of steel, but with a silence that carried weight, a promise older than the dust beneath her boots. If this tale of grit and solitude stirs you, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's your support that keeps these stories alive, breathing life into the forgotten corners of the frontier. Stay with us, because Meera's world is about to crack open, and what lies beyond will test everything she thought she knew. The silence that gripped the San Pedro Valley that morning in 1885 was heavier than the August heat, a quiet that felt alive, watching. Meera Callahan stood by her cabin, her hand still resting on the Colt's grip, eyes locked on the ridge where the trail carved a jagged scar through the rock. The air thrummed with an unspoken warning, and she knew the desert didn't lie. Something was out there, moving closer, and it wasn't the wind. As the sun climbed, burning the haze from the horizon, 3 figures appeared on the ridge, their silhouettes sharp against the molten sky. They were Apache, their lean forms astride paint ponies, moving with a grace that seemed to mock the rugged earth. Meera's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard the tales in Mesquite Hollow, raiders who struck like lightning and vanished into dust. These men didn't charge or shout. They watched her, their gaze steady as stone, then melted back into the landscape as if they'd never been. Her fingers tightened on the pistol. A scout, she thought. A warning of worse to come. For 3 days, the valley held its breath. Meera went about her chores with a coiled alertness, her rifle never far. She mended a frayed harness, hauled water from the spring, and checked the snares she'd set for rabbits, each task shadowed by the memory of those riders. At night, she lay awake, the cabin's ironwood door barred, listening for hoofbeats that never came. The silence was a taunt, daring her to let her guard down. On the 4th day, they returned, not 3, but 7. They came at noon, when the sun hammered the valley into submission. 7 Apache warriors crested the ridge, their ponies stepping light as ghosts over the cracked earth. At their head rode a man whose presence seemed to bend the air around him. Gota, son of the chief her father had saved. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved from the same granite as the mountains, with eyes like polished obsidian that missed nothing. His long black hair was tied back with a simple leather band, an eagle feather catching the light. The others followed in a disciplined line, their buckskin leggings and rifles across their laps, a quiet testament to their purpose. They didn't whoop or brandish weapons. They rode with a stillness that sent a shiver down Meera's spine, not of fear, but of something older, deeper. Meera stood her ground in front of the cabin, her Winchester cradled in her arms, its barrel glinting like a challenge. The riders stopped 50 yards out, a respectful distance, but close enough for her to see the beadwork on their moccasins, the sweat gleaming on their bare chests. Gota dismounted, his movements deliberate, his hands open at his sides in a gesture of peace. He stepped forward, stopping well short of the invisible line Meera had drawn in her mind. Her voice, rough from disuse, cut through the silence like a blade. "State your business, then ride on. This land's mine, and so's the water." Gota's eyes met hers, unyielding but not hostile. When he spoke, his voice was a low baritone. the English words shaped with care, carrying a faint musical cadence. "We have not come for water, Meera Callahan," he said, her name sounding like a vow on his tongue. "Nor for war. We have come from the Sierra Madre to honor a debt. My father, Chief Coquius, swore an oath to your father, Elias. I am here to ask for your hand in marriage." The words hit like a rifle shot, sharp and surreal. Meera's grip on the Winchester tightened, her knuckles whitening. Marriage? The notion was as foreign as rain in July, a madness that belonged to a world she'd never known. She'd spoken to no one in years, her only companions the wind and the weight of her solitude. "You're out of your damn mind," she snapped, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Get off my land, all of you, or I'll put a bullet in you." Gota didn't flinch. His men, still mounted, watched with the calm of predators at rest, their faces unreadable. "We mean you no harm," Gota said, his tone as even as the horizon. "We will not leave until you hear our purpose." Meera's eyes flicked to the others, noting their rifles, their bows, the quiet menace of their stillness. She could fire. Her aim was true. But 1 against 7 was a fool's bet. Instead, she raised the Winchester, sighted a patch of dirt near Gota's feet, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked the air, kicking up a puff of dust. A warning, clear as day. The Apache didn't move. Gota's gaze held hers, unshaken, as if the bullet was a child's tantrum. "You are a good shot," he said, a flicker of respect in his voice. "But we are not your enemies." Meera's heart pounded, a wild drum against her ribs. She gestured with the rifle toward the ridge. "Go back where you came from. I don't want your purpose or your promises." Gota nodded, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he turned to his men, a silent signal passing between them. They dismounted with the same eerie grace, moving to the base of the ridge to set up a camp. They worked with quiet efficiency, tending their horses, building a smokeless fire, their presence a stubborn stain on her land. Meera watched, her rifle still in hand, as they settled in, not crossing her boundary, but refusing to leave. It wasn't an invasion. It was a siege of patience, a test she wasn't sure she could win. She retreated to her cabin, barring the door with a trembling hand. Through a crack in the shutter, she saw their camp take shape, a disciplined outpost under the shadow of the ridge. They weren't leaving. Her supplies were low. Flour, salt, bullets, and Mesquite Hollow was a half-day's ride. The thought of leaving her land unguarded twisted her gut, but staying, with these silent giants watching, felt like a noose tightening. She needed help, or at least answers, but the town had never been her ally. Still, she'd ride out tomorrow. If this story of defiance and mystery pulls you in, hit that subscribe button. It's your support that keeps these tales of the frontier burning bright. Stay with us, because Meera's about to face a world that plays by no rules she knows. In Mesquite Hollow, trouble was brewing thicker than the dust on the saloon floor. Clayton Reeves, a rancher with a smile like a rattlesnake's, had long coveted Meera's spring. Her story, whispered in the town's shadows, was his chance. He spread lies of Apache raiders holding her hostage, stoking fear among the drunks and drifters. Sheriff Dodd, his pockets lined with Reeves's coin, turned a blind eye, muttering about no laws against proposals. Meera saddled her mule, Jezebel, at dawn, her rifle slung across her back. As she rode out, the Apache camp was awake, Gota standing by the fire, his eyes tracking her. She felt their gaze like a weight, not threatening but unrelenting, as she headed toward a town that might betray her as surely as the desert itself. The trail to Mesquite Hollow stretched like a raw wound through the desert, and Meera Callahan rode it with a fire in her gut, the weight of the Apache's gaze still burning her back. She'd left her valley under siege, not by force, but by a patience that felt more dangerous than any rifle. Gotha's words, that impossible proposal, echoed in her mind, a riddle wrapped in dust. She needed supplies, answers, maybe even help. But Mesquite Hollow was a viper's nest, and she was no fool to expect kindness from it. The town emerged from the haze, a cluster of sun-bleached shacks huddled around a dusty street. Meera tied Jezebel to the hitching post outside Baxter's Mercantile, the bell above the door jangling like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of molasses and tobacco. Martha Baxter, a wiry woman with eyes sharp as a hawk's, looked up from her ledger. "Meera Callahan," she said, her voice a mix of pity and curiosity. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Trouble out your way?" Meera's jaw tightened. "Need flour, salt, coffee, and 4570 cartridges," she said, her tone flat, dodging the question. As Martha gathered the goods, a shadow loomed near the pickle barrels. Clayton Reeves, his mustache oiled to a predatory sheen, tipped his hat with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Callahan," he drawled, "rare to see you in civilization. That spring of yours still running?" Meera's hand twitched toward her Colt. "It is," she said curtly. Reeves had offered to buy her land before, his words sweet as arsenic, and she'd sent him packing. He wanted her water, and men like him didn't take no lightly. The air grew heavier when Meera spoke, her voice low but steady. "Got a problem, Reeves. 7 Apache camped on my land. Their leader says he's here to marry me." Martha gasped, her hand freezing mid-count. Reeves's eyes gleamed, a coyote scenting blood. "Marry you," he chuckled, the sound cold as a winter creek. "That's rich. You sure the heat ain't cooking your brain?" Meera's cheeks burned, but she held his gaze. "They've been there 4 days. Won't leave." "You need the law," Martha whispered, glancing toward the sheriff's office. Reeves's smile widened, predatory. "Careful, girl. Apache don't court. They take." Meera didn't reply, paying for her supplies and striding out, her boots kicking up dust. At the sheriff's office, Sheriff Dodd lounged behind a cluttered desk, his badge tarnished as his conscience. She told her story, every bizarre detail, her voice like iron. Dodd leaned back, chewing a cigar, his eyes half-lidded. "So, 7 Apache, polite as you please. Want to wed you? No theft? No shots fired?" He snorted. "Ain't no law against a man proposing, Meera. Sounds like a tall tale. Meanwhile, Reeves says you're damming up his creek." "That's a lie," she snapped. "My spring don't feed his land." Dodd shrugged, dismissive. "I got real problems. Drunks, claim jumpers, Reeves's complaints. Sell to him and move on, or deal with your suitors yourself." Meera's hope crumbled like dry adobe. She left, Reeves's smug grin watching her from the saloon porch. The town had turned its back, and she rode home with a cold truth. She was alone, save for the strangers on her land. Back in the San Pedro Valley, the Apache camp was a fixture, a silent challenge at the ridge's base. Meera unpacked her supplies, her mind churning. She expected raids, not this. Men who waited, watched, and offered nothing but words she couldn't trust. Yet they stayed beyond her line, their discipline unnerving. The next morning, she found a skinned deer on the flat stone by her door, its meat clean and ready for the pan. Suspicion flared. Was it a trick? But hunger won. She cooked it. The act, a grudging acceptance, the taste of their gift sharp on her tongue. Days bled into a tense rhythm. Meera tended her garden, her movements deliberate, aware of their eyes. A sandstorm swept through, tearing a section of her corral fence. Before she could drag the splintered posts, 2 Apache appeared, silent, efficient. One, gray streaking his hair, wove sinew through the wood, his fingers deft as a weaver's. They didn't speak, didn't meet her eyes, just worked and left with a nod. Meera stood in the settling dust, her chest tight with a mix of gratitude and distrust. It was help, unasked, and it stung like a burr under her skin. She began to see them not as a faceless threat, but as men. The youngest practiced archery, his arrows splitting reeds with deadly grace. Another carved wood, his knife coaxing wolves and hawks from rough branches. Their laughter, low and rare, startled her, a human sound in her silent world. Gota was different, always watching, not with menace, but with a quiet intensity, as if reading the land through her. One dusk, her old mare, Juniper, spooked in a mesquite thicket, her hooves thrashing in panic. Meera's commands failed, her voice lost to the mare's fear. Then Gota was there, moving like a shadow, his voice a low, rhythmic chant in Apache. The words were foreign, but their cadence soothed, calming Juniper's trembling flanks. He freed her with gentle hands, his touch sure, and led her to Meera. "She trusts you," he said, his eyes meeting hers, "like the land does." That night, under a sky bruised with stars, Gota approached her porch, stopping at her line. "Meera Callahan," he called, his voice clear, respectful. "The time has come to speak the truth." She set her rifle down, curiosity outweighing caution. He stood tall, the eagle feather catching the moonlight. 16 years ago, my father, Chief Kokias, and his family were hunted like wolves. Your father, Elias, found them, bleeding in these hills. He hid them in this cabin, shared his food, his spring. He saved my mother, my sister, me. He asked for nothing, but my father swore an oath. Our blood would join, a debt of life repaid. Meera's breath caught, flashes stirred, her mother's hushed voice, a stranger's fevered moans, the scent of herbs in the dark. It was real, not a child's dream. "Your father's courage bound our families," Gota said. "I am here to honor that vow, to offer you my name, my people's protection." The words cracked something in her, a wall she'd built against the world. If this tale of honor and hidden debts grips you, subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps these frontier stories alive, shining light on truths buried in the dust. Stay with us, because Meera's choice is coming, and it'll be forged in fire. The revelation left her reeling, but the valley offered no time for reflection. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance, not the Apache's silent tread, but a reckless clamor, heavy with intent. Gota's eyes darkened, his hand signaling his men. They vanished into the rocks, rifles ready. Meera gripped her Winchester, her heart a drumbeat. The desert had warned her trouble was coming, and now it was here, riding hard. The night air in the San Pedro Valley crackled with menace, the distant hoofbeats growing louder, a storm of steel and malice rolling toward Meera Callahan's land. She stood on her porch, Winchester in hand, her heart a war drum echoing the desert's warning. Gota and his Apache warriors had vanished into the shadows, their rifles glinting faintly in the moonlight. The truth of her father's oath still burned in her mind, a tether to a past she'd barely grasped. But there was no time to dwell. Trouble had arrived, and it wore the face of greed. Clayton Reeves had spun his lies in Mesquite Hollow, painting Meera as a damsel held captive by savages. His posse, a dozen drunks and hired guns, thundered into the valley, their horses churning dust, their voices slurred with whiskey and bravado. Reeves led them, his fine coat flapping like a vulture's wings, a rusted Gatling gun rattling in a wagon behind. Their plan was crude: kill the Apache, seize the spring, and force Meera to sell, or worse. The desert night, vast and unforgiving, seemed to hold its breath as they fanned out, their lanterns casting jagged pools of light. Meera's eyes flicked to the ridge where Gota's men had melted into the rocks. She knew this land, every gulch, every boulder, and her father's lessons whispered in her blood. A memory stirred, a hidden stone cleft, a cave her father had shown her, barely wide enough for a mule. "Hide here when the world turns mean," he'd said. She signaled Gota with a sharp whistle, pointing to the shadowed outcrop. He nodded, understanding in an instant, and his warriors moved like ghosts, slipping into the cleft's mouth, rifles ready. Reeves's voice shattered the silence, thick with false righteousness. "Come out, you heathens! Let the girl go, or we'll burn this valley to ash!" His men laughed, their pistols drawn, the Gatling's barrel gleaming like a predator's teeth. Meera stepped into the doorway, her rifle leveled. "This is my land, Reeves," she shouted, her voice cutting like a blade. "You're trespassing. Ride out, or you'll regret it." Reeves's laugh was a snake's hiss. "Playing their game, are you? We're here to save you, darling." He raised his pistol, and the first shot rang out, not from him, but from a drunken gunman, the bullet splintering the cabin's doorframe inches from her head. The valley erupted in chaos. From the cleft, Apache rifles answered, their shots precise, felling 2 of Reeves's men before they could blink. The warriors fired and moved, shadows among shadows, their volleys making the posse seem surrounded by a legion. Meera's instincts kicked in. She dropped to a crouch, her Winchester barking, a .45-70 round, slamming into a gunman's chest. She worked the lever, chambering another, her hand steady despite the roar of gunfire. This wasn't just her home. She was fighting for her life, alongside men bound to her by a vow she was only beginning to understand. Gota stood tall, a titan in the moonlight, directing his men with hand signals, his rifle spitting death. He drew fire deliberately, his presence a shield for Meera's cabin. The Gatling gun sputtered to life, its operator fumbling with the crank, spraying bullets wildly into the night. Meera spotted a man dragging a dynamite stick toward her porch, the fuse sparking. She didn't hesitate. Her shot caught him square, the dynamite rolling harmlessly into the dirt. The Apaches seized the moment, their arrows and bullets cutting through the posse like a scythe through wheat. Reeves's men, fueled by liquor, not loyalty, crumbled under the disciplined assault. Half fell, dead or wounded. The rest broke, fleeing like rats into the dark. Reeves was left alone, his horse shot out from under him, cowering behind its corpse. His fine clothes were smeared with blood and dust, his hands shaking as he fumbled with his pistol. Gota and his warriors emerged, circling him like wolves. Meera stepped from the cabin, her rifle hot, her eyes blazing with a fury forged in years of solitude. Reeves looked up, terror etching his face, as he saw her beside Gota, not a captive, but a partner. "This land is mine," she said, her voice ringing with iron, "and it's protected by the Apache's honor. You're done, Reeves." Gota's justice was cold, precise. He took Reeves's guns, his boots, leaving him a single canteen. "Walk to your town," he said, his voice like gravel. "Tell them the Callahan land is ours to guard. Cross her again, and you'll face our wrath." Reeves stumbled into the night, a broken man, his schemes dust in the wind. The valley fell silent, the groans of the wounded and the nervous whinny of a stray horse the only sounds. Meera's hands trembled now, the adrenaline fading, but she stood tall, her resolve unbroken. By dawn, Sheriff Dodd arrived, prodded by the panicked tales of Reeves's survivors. He expected carnage, a helpless woman. Instead, he found Meera on her porch, sipping coffee, Gota nearby, his warriors cleaning their rifles in the morning light. The bodies of Reeves's men lay stacked, a grim testament to the night's work. "Miss Callahan," Dodd stammered, his badge dull in the sun. You all right?" Meera's gaze was steel. "Better than your friends, Sheriff. They attacked my home. We defended it." She gestured to the Apache. "These are my allies, not my captors." Dodd's eyes darted to the warriors, then to the dead. Reeves's lies unraveled in the face of Meera's calm authority and the Apache's quiet strength. He muttered about taking the bodies, avoiding her gaze, knowing he'd been outplayed. As he left, dragging Reeves's broken dream with him, a new quiet settled over the valley. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but a peace carved from survival. Gotha turned to Meera, his eyes searching. "The oath is fulfilled," he said softly. "Your land is safe. If you wish, we will leave." Meera looked at the cabin, the spring, the mountains that had been her cage and her shield. The oath, the fight, had shifted something in her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a bridge between worlds. "You came for my hand," she said, her voice clear, steady. "You never heard my answer." Gotha waited, his presence a steady anchor. A faint smile curved her lips, weathered, but fierce. "I'll ride with you, Gotha. I'll see your world. If it's where I belong, I'll be your wife." The choice wasn't surrender. It was a claim on a future she'd never dared imagine. The valley, once her fortress, was now a starting point. She wouldn't leave today, but preparations would begin. As the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the land, Meera stood beside Gotha, no longer alone. She was the heart of a new legacy, forged in blood and honor, ready to step into a story just beginning. Meera Callahan's saga, from a lone survivor in the San Pedro Valley to a bridge between two worlds, reveals how honor and grit can reshape fate in the brutal West of 1885. Her choice, forged in gunfire and an ancient vow, sparks a question. Faced with a debt that demands your future, what would you do? Share your thoughts below. Did Meera's fierce defiance or Gotha's unwavering loyalty hit you hardest? Your voices breathe life into these frontier tales, and we're deeply grateful for every listener riding this trail with us. Hit that like button, tell us where you're tuning in from, and join us soon for more stories that uncover the wild's beating heart.